माता की जय, भारत माता की जय, भारत माता की जय, कलका माता की जय, कलका माता की जय, कलका माता की जय.
Indian Army and IAF seek 200 light helicopters to replace aging Chetak Cheetah fleet. The Defense Ministry has issued a Request for Information (RFI) to replace its fleet of Chetak and Cheetah helicopters with about 200 modern light helicopters classified as reconnaissance and surveillance helicopters. The new helicopters will serve both the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force, with an expected requirement of 120 units for the Army and 80 for the Air Force. The RFI aims to finalize technical requirements, decide the procurement method, and identify potential suppliers, including Indian companies partnering with original equipment manufacturers (OEMs) who can supply reconnaissance and surveillance helicopters. These helicopters will have multiple roles, operating day and night. Their duties will include reconnaissance and surveillance, carrying small troops or quick reaction teams for special missions, supporting ground operations with internal and external loads, scouting alongside attack helicopters, casualty evacuation including search and rescue, and aiding civil authorities when required. In March, the Indian Air Force had already planned to acquire more utility helicopters alongside other defense platforms. According to the Standing Committee on Defence report tabled in Parliament, key planned acquisitions for 2025-26 include low-level radars, light combat aircraft (LCA), light utility helicopters, multi-role helicopters, and leased mid-air refueling aircraft. The Cabinet Committee on Security also approved the purchase of 156 light combat helicopters worth over 45,000 crore rupees from Hindustan Aeronautics Limited (HAL) for the Army and Air Force. These 156 choppers, similar to the RSH-MH, will be divided between the Indian Army and Indian Air Force for operations along the China and Pakistan borders. This will also be a major step towards job creation and expanding the aerospace ecosystem within the country, defense sources told ANI. The Ministry of Defense (MoD) further emphasized that the IAF is focused on achieving self-reliance in defense manufacturing and supporting the growth of the domestic defense industry. As part of the Aatmanirbhar Bharat initiative, the IAF is working on indigenous production of fighters, transport aircraft, helicopters, trainer aircraft, air-to-air and air-to-ground weapons, surface-to-air guided weapons, unmanned aerial vehicles, and radars. IAF is pursuing indigenous production of fighters, transport helicopters and trainer aircraft, along with air-to-air weapons, air-to-ground weapons, surface-to-air guided weapons, unmanned aerial vehicles and radars, the Defense Ministry said in its report.
Ministry of Defense denies reports of pausing defense purchases with US. The Ministry of Defense on Friday, August 8, 2025, denied the news reports on India pausing the talks related to defense purchases with the US as false and fabricated. It also clarified that the various cases of procurement are being progressed as per the extant procedures. Reuters' exclusive report, quoting 3 Indian officials familiar with the matter, claimed that India has put on hold its plans to procure new US weapons and aircraft. The report claimed it was the first concrete sign of discontent after tariffs imposed on India's exports by President Donald Trump. The US President Donald Trump on August 6 imposed an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods as punishment for Delhi's purchases of Russian oil, which he said meant the country was funding Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That raised the total duty on Indian exports to 50%, among the highest of any US trading partner.
IIT-G leads defense academia synergy with research centers. In a step towards strengthening India's defense innovation ecosystem, IIT-Guwahati is spearheading the establishment of Manekshaw centers for defense and security research across premier academic institutions nationwide. The initiative, under the Ministry of Education, aims to create a unified platform connecting the armed forces, security agencies, and research institutions. A delegation led by IIT-G Director Prof. Devendra Jalhilal and Chief Patron of the Manekshaw Center of Excellence recently briefed Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan on the rollout of nodal centers dedicated to defense and national security research. Joining Prof. Jalhilal were Prof. Manindra Agarwal, Director of IIT Kanpur and Deputy Chief Patron, and Lieutenant General Retired Dr. Subrata Saha, Executive Chairman and COO of the center. Manekshaw Center will act as an interface between Indian academia and defense forces. IITs, IISc, IITs and NITs will be members of the center. The center will periodically carry out dialogues with defense agencies and will participate actively to define and design systems for Indian security needs. It will work towards finding Indian solutions, thus fulfilling the aspiration of Aatmanirbhar Bharat, Prof. Jalhilal said. IIT-G in a statement said the Education Minister has extended full support to the initiative, emphasizing the centre's role in fostering interinstitutional collaboration and building a robust innovation ecosystem. Conceived by Lieutenant General Saha and Prof. Sukumar Nandi, Dean of Administration at IIT-G, the initiative currently includes IITs Guwahati, Madras, Kanpur, Jodhpur, Dharwad, Delhi, Bombay, Kharagpur, BHU Varanasi, ISM Dhanbad, IISc Bangalore, and IIT Delhi, with more institutions expected to join.
India PM Modi speaks to Russia's Putin, discusses Ukraine. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said on Friday that he spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin by phone and thanked him for sharing the latest developments on Ukraine. The conversation between the two leaders came days after US President Donald Trump announced an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods to penalize New Delhi for continuing to buy Russian oil. The penalty took the total levy on Indian goods exported to the US to 50%, among the highest levied on any US trading partner. Had a very good and detailed conversation with my friend President Putin. I thanked him for sharing the latest developments on Ukraine, Modi said in a post on X. India's Foreign Ministry said Modi invited Putin to New Delhi for the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit later this year. The two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to further deepen the special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia, the ministry said in a statement. Modi also spoke with Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva by phone on Thursday, discussing a broad range of topics that included high tariffs imposed by the US. Trade talks between India and the United States collapsed after 5 rounds of negotiations over disagreement on opening India's vast farm and dairy sectors and stopping Russian oil purchases. Modi's conversation with Putin also came a day after Russia and India stressed their commitment to a strategic partnership in bilateral security talks in Moscow between Indian National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and Sergei Shoigu, Secretary of Russia's Security Council.
India's defense output, exports, hit record highs under Aatmanirbhar Bharat. The Ministry of Defence on Saturday informed that India's defence production reached an all-time high of 1,50,590 crore rupees in the financial year 2024-25. According to official data released by the ministry, this marks an 18% increase from the rupees 1.27 lakh crore recorded in 2023-24 and a 90% rise compared to rupees 79,071 crore in 2019-20. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh credited the growth to the combined efforts of the Department of Defence Production, Defence Public Sector Undertakings, other public sector units and private industry. He said the continued growth reflects the strengthening of India's defence industrial base. Defence Public Sector Undertakings and other public sector entities contributed approximately 77% of the total output, while the private sector accounted for 23%. The private sector's share rose from 21% in the previous fiscal year, showing a gradual increase in its role within the defence manufacturing ecosystem. Year-on-year growth was seen across both segments. Public sector production rose by 16%, while private sector production increased by 28% in FY 2024-25. The government attributes the rise to policy reforms, efforts to ease doing business, and a focus on indigenization under the Aatmanirbhar Bharat initiative. The initiative aims to reduce reliance on imports and boost defence exports. Defence exports also reached a record of Rs 23,622 crore in 2024-25, reflecting a 12.04% increase over the previous year's figure of Rs 21,083 crore. Officials said India's defence sector is expected to maintain this growth momentum, supported by continued reforms, increased private participation and expanding export potential.